Hey, Larken Rose here. So, have you heard? This changes everything. So, I'm going to start by complaining about the number of times that phrase is used as clickbait in titles. I guess somebody determined that saying that makes people think it's important enough, they're going to click on it. Now, in this case, even though I did the same thing with the same clickbait, the actual topic of the video has to do with that. But it has to do with the opposite of that, because so many people seem to want some big thing to happen. They're like paying close attention to the political scene and what legislation has been proposed and none of that makes any difference. None at all. None of that fixes anything. But people like watch the circus as if something significant is going to happen there. Now, there are steps towards authoritarian lunacy that happen, and some get undone and then happen again and go back and forth. But the thing that matters is a slow progress, and it's the mentality of the people, as I've said a zillion times. But I see a ton of people, like if I make fun of people for voting and bickering over which slave master they're going to bow to and all that stuff, they say, well, then what are the actionable suggestions, and what do we go do to suddenly change the world from this into a freedom paradise? Suddenly, nothing. You don't do anything. The only thing to do is change more minds. Do what you can to get as many people as possible, as fast as possible, to give up the belief in authority. That is the only thing that gets there. The only thing. There isn't some, well, we blow up a building, or we elected this guy, or we repealed this piece of legislation, or whatever it is. There is no, this changes everything that is going to happen, or that has happened. No, it doesn't. The thing keeps going. And I can stand here back in my day and describe how when I first got into politics, not got into it running for office, but paid attention to it back when I was still statist, like early 90s, nothing was fundamentally different than it is now. The game is the same. The lies are the same. It's a little bit more ridiculous and blunt and in your face now, which weirdly in the long term I think is a good thing, because I think it means a lot fewer people have any respect for the system or the game or the office. So I'm fine with that. But the game keeps being the game. So the people focusing on the game, thinking that something is suddenly going to happen, good or bad, that drastically changes everything. No, it isn't. No, it's not. It's not going to. And if they're looking for some good thing that's suddenly going to change everything, it's not going to either. The way to get from slavery to not slavery to freedom has nothing to do with the master. The master is going to still wish he could enslave people because he's already there. He's already doing that, which means he doesn't mind that. So he will do that if he can. The thing that changes is not the master. The thing that changes is the mentality of the slaves and whether they accept the legitimacy and decide to put up with being treated like livestock. That's the thing that matters. Now, at some point, when people give up their belief and obligation to obey a ruling class, specific things will happen. Like you get an actual revolution over here and an assassination over there, or just government loses control entirely like in the Soviet Union and just kind of falls over, or Roman Empire spreads its tentacles too far and then just sort of loses control and fizzles, doesn't get like drastically overthrown in one big thing. So there are individual events that occur, but those are the effect, not the cause. Those are the effect of people no longer feeling beholden to a particular set of crooks. Now, my goal is not to get a bunch of people not feeling beholden to this particular set of tyrannical crooks. My goal is to get it so nobody feels beholden to any group of crooks. So instead of a revolution where you go around in circles and you get rid of one tyrant and then you put up another tyrant and then you're all shocked that, hey, why did this turn out badly? It actually ends statism entirely. That's my goal. And then you have actual freedom. But that's actually another glaring example of my point. Even an open revolution in the American colonies, where they're like, we're not going to pay your 3% tax on tea, or whatever it was. Now conservators are like, yeah, you impose 150% tariff on us if we buy something from China. Like, awesome progress you got going there. But the American Revolution was a fine example, because in the long run it didn't accomplish anything. It built a ruling class that would be way, way worse than King George III ever was. By a mile. Indisputably, if you want to know anything about history. So the thing that matters is the mentality of the people and whether they feel obligated to obey a ruling class. So that is my entire focus. But you can tell by people's comments that, like, well, I voted for this guy hoping that would drastically change everything and fix the world. And now you're telling me I shouldn't have. Well, what do I do to drastically and suddenly change the whole world and fix everything? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. There's absolutely nothing you can do that would accomplish that. There is only one thing that leads to actual freedom for humanity overall. And it has nothing to do with voting. And it has nothing to do with bickering over what the laws of the ruling class should be. It has to do with people escaping the mindset of statism, giving up the superstition of political authority. That's all. That's the one path. That is the only path. And I can say, like a lot of people say, well, that's just your focus and what you want to do. We're working at it this way. No, you're not. You're working at nothing that way and accomplishing nothing that way. You know how I can tell? Because if your purpose is to vote differently and petition for legislation, that is all founded on the premise that elections and legislation are legitimate and that government is legitimate. You're just begging the master for mercy. Even if you were to get mercy from the master, which, by the way, you won't, he's still your master. You don't get to freedom by way of asking your master to be nicer to you. Ever. Doesn't even conceptually make any sense. So I'm not just saying, well, the thing I focus on is the one that matters. The thing you focus on is the one that doesn't. I'm saying, logically, the only thing, the thing that has to happen for humanity to be free is for humanity to stop believing that they're obligated to bow to a master. You can't be free if you still think you're obligated to bow to a master. You just can't. You're not even free inside your own head, like I've said a million times. But so many people who wanted a quick fix with voting or whatever, Trump's going to make America great again. Falling for that stupid shit. When I say stop falling for that stupid shit, it doesn't do any good. It's the same crap they've been doing forever. Well, what will suddenly change everything and fix everything? Nothing at all. There's nothing in the world that'll fix everything. It has to do with the changing mentality of humanity. Now, there's actually lots of good news on that front, because there are more and more people talking about these things and understanding these things and actually giving up statism instead of just bickering about the current crook on the throne and wanting a different crook on the throne. But that isn't suddenly changes everything. Now, the closest thing there can ever be to this suddenly changes everything is, well, right about now, because these are the perfect conditions for it, if there is some way for somebody to get a huge audience and have all those people who are currently disillusioned with politics, left and right, or moderate, or people who don't even pay any attention to it, to get some way to get through to them, to get them thinking about things really quickly, billions of people at a time, or hundreds of millions at a time, or whatever. That is the only thing. And that still wouldn't be immediate, but it's the thing that has to change. And so many people think as if government is the thing that has changed. No, it doesn't. Not at all. The mentality of the people is the thing that determines that. And what I was saying before is there can be things that happen, like when enough people believe, like, or stop believing that they have to obey laws, made up bullshit from political crooks, then a bunch of stuff happens as an effect, like, well, we're not going to pay your laws anymore, and maybe you'll try to stomp on us, or maybe there'll be an actual overthrow of some power-happy psychos. Maybe people will fight back against thugs of the state. Maybe they'll just quietly sort of go off grid and ignore it, and the state will lose control. So those things can happen, but those things aren't my focus either, because they're inevitable. When enough people don't believe in an obligation to obey, you're doomed. And I've described this regarding chattel slavery too. If you actually had one lazy-ass wig-wearing fat white guy owning a plantation and 30 slaves who were like really strong and in good shape, if none of them thought it was legitimate, and I know this is going to upset some people because we want to imagine that the slaves were all thinking, this is horrible, we have to do what we can to overthrow it. Nope. Just like most people today don't recognize the injustice of what's being done to them. Even something as drastic as slavery, most slaves accepted it as legitimate and valid. Because if they didn't, that's the end of slavery. You think 30 like strong slaves can't find a way to defeat one fat lazy white guy? And they weren't all fat, they weren't all lazy, they weren't all white, but I'm using the cliche version. You think he could actually enslave them? Well, there were also some slave catchers. Okay? If 20, 30 slaves, or 100, decide, okay, we're going to end this, and this sort of thing did start to happen at some point, and they say, well, we're going to arm ourselves, and if you try to enslave us, good luck with that. You think a couple slave catchers are going to, we tracked down 30 slaves who are tired of being treated like slaves. We'll just speak to them sternly, and I'm sure they'll go back to the master. Nope, the freeing of the mind is the thing that mattered. And Frederick Douglass, who was a slave, talks about this in great detail. So if you don't believe me, you can go read it from somebody who spent much of his life as an actual slave, describing the mental enslavement and how he escaped that, which to me is really, really damn impressive, way more impressive than him escaping the physical slavery, which that's pretty impressive too. But given the indoctrination and the mental just brainwashing that he and all the slaves are put through, for him to be able to think outside this and reason through and go, this isn't okay at all. It's not just I want a nicer master, it's not okay at all. So when you get there, the outcome is inevitable. Like, it may go a number of different ways. They may, like, lynch the slave master. They may sneak away in the middle of the night, whatever. They may overthrow the overseer in the middle of the day, whatever. But if enough people understand, you're not the boss of us, we're not putting up with this, one way or another, that's the end. And that's why my entire focus is what it is. And all the people who complain that you're just like saying words. Yeah. Saying words is what changes people's minds. Like the abolitionists said words. They pointed out how evil the slavery was. Now, a bunch of them also did things to resist, to disobey and resist, sometimes even by force, which I'm all in favor of. Yep. But you have to have enough people of the right mindset who actually believe in freedom before any of that other stuff works. And when you get enough people in the mindset, anything works. You could literally, like if tomorrow, everyone in the US or the whole world, suddenly their belief in authority just fell out of their brains for some reason. They're like, oh, yeah, we're not beholden to those crooks. They don't have to do anything. They just go about their lives and they stop sending money in forms to parasites in D.C. and other parasite offices, and just ignore it out of existence. And the ruling class has nowhere near the resources to do anything about that. They would just fizzle and be gone. But that's if everybody does it. So somewhere between now and then, there's enough people to resist openly or quietly or whatever. But there is no suddenly changes everything. There is one thing that determines the outcome of this, and this is the mentality of the people. That's all. That's why that's what I focus on. And so the people who wanted a shortcut, and I point out that shortcut doesn't work, it just, you're going around in circles, they say, well, then what is the shortcut that fixes everything, that changes everything? There isn't one. And that's the bad news, is you can keep hoping for some stupid political solution and making a fool out of yourself for another 100 years, several more generations of duped people playing this idiotic game. Or you could recognize the only path to freedom happens between the ears of the people, has nothing to do with the ruling class. They're just this thing that will victimize you as long as you let it. And when enough people say, yeah, we're done letting them victimize us, okay, they'll find a way to overthrow it. I don't need to describe exactly how they're going to do that. They'll figure out ways. There's 100 different ways to do it, some nastier than others. But so the bad news is, no, nothing changes everything all of a sudden. The good news is the one thing that matters has been changing dramatically. And the reason I get so upset at the people who were into voluntarism and understood non-aggression and self-ownership and all that, and fell back into the, well, maybe in this case we better vote for the lesser of two evils, is because you stopped focusing on the only thing that matters in the long run. The only thing that matters. And you went back to reinforcing the exact opposite of the only thing that matters. You went back to reinforcing the only thing in the way, which is the belief in authority and government and the laws of a political ruling class. You went back to doing things that just reinforce the notion that that's all legitimate. So you're not even just not doing the only thing that helps. You're directly working against the only thing that helps. So I'm still perfectly optimistic because I see more and more people giving up statism, and most of them way faster than I did. I took years to let go of that last little bit, which is kind of depressing and embarrassing, but I did. But now tons of people are giving it up. But that's for anybody who's like, well, what's your solution? There is no my solution. There is no tactical thing to save the day. There is, do people believe they are beholden to a master or don't they? When they don't, we won. It's that simple. And all the other peripheral noise and the in-between stuff going on, it doesn't matter at all in the long run. The thing that matters is, do the people believe that it's okay for them to be livestock? When they don't, they won't be treated like livestock anymore.